Today we're going to be learning how to shade a sphere. The first thing you want to do is draw a perfect circle. When you draw a perfect circle, make sure you're moving your entire arm and not just your wrist. By moving your entire arm in a complete circle, you're going to help create a more accurate depiction of a circle than if you had just had your arm resting on the table. The next thing you want to do is take your kneaded eraser and you want to erase the extra lines that don't make up that perfect edge. And by doing this, you're also getting rid of that nice harsh outline, and you want to just be left with a really nice light gray. After that, you want to look at your values and understand that you're going to be doing contour cross hatching. So that means you want to make sure that your marks are following the contour of the form. For instance, when you're drawing a hatching mark in the middle of the form, it should be straight. But as your hatching marks are getting closer to that contour or closer to that edge, they should be becoming more round to where they match the edge of that object. Same thing if I was going horizontally. In the middle, it would be straight, but as I reach and become closer to that contour and closer to that edge, my marks are becoming more circular. You're going to begin shading today with your 2H pencil. You want to make sure that you're building up your values in light layers and light values first. So when I'm starting, I'm making sure that my marks are not only curving around the form, but are really, really light in value, really soft, and I'm trying to make my marks be really, really close to one another. So there's very little separation in between my marks. It almost is looking like a solid fill. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm starting my mark on the top part of the circle and ending it at the other end of the circle. What you don't want to do is draw a bunch of little tiny marks on the inside, because then you don't control the values and you're going to end up getting all of these little tiny dark tidbit lines on the inside of your form that is not going to look good. So just make sure that your marks start on the outer edge and end on the opposite side. So here I have a really nice solid value that's all really light. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to contour crosshatch over my contour hatching marks that I've previously done. So this time when I contour crosshatch, I'm going to go in a different direction. Remember, when I'm in the middle, my line's going to be straight. But as I shade out to the side, my marks are going to become a lot rounder. Now that I'm building up darker values, I also want to pay even more attention to where my values are placed on my form. This is where my highlight is, so I don't want to press too hard or make too many marks in that area. So as I'm shading into that area, I'm trying to press as light as possible as to not make that highlighted section too dark. There's my second layer. My third layer, I want to avoid that highlighted section at all costs. And every consecutive layer that I'm shading, I'm starting to press a little bit harder. And remember, as you shade, you want to start from one end of the object and have your marks reach the other end. Now, the only time you don't want to do that is here, for instance, where when I'm going into my highlighted section, I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil to make sure that those marks are not going to be curved or running into my highlighted section. But I always want to make sure that every one of my marks is curving around the form. So when I got to the middle here, my marks were straighter. Now that I'm coming back to my edge, they're starting to round out a lot more. I'm going to do one more layer with my 2H pencil, and this time I'm going to start trying to put in my core shadow. Notice I'm trying to match the value placement on my object. So I'm pressing harder. And then as I'm going into the lighter value sections, I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil to create a nice smooth transition of values, which is called gradation. Now I need to build up that core shadow on the opposite side. Notice once again that all of my marks are starting on the edge. And I'm lifting up my pencil as I go towards the center. I could carry it away all the way to the other side, but for me, I feel like I have more control when I lift it up in the center of the form. At this point, you can move on to the next darkest pencil, and that's your HB. Remember, H stands for hard, meaning that there's clay in the graphite, and B stands for black, meaning that there's more graphite, in the lead. HB means that there's an equal proportion of clay and graphite in the lead. So this means it's going to automatically make a darker mark than my 2H pencil. Notice how dark those marks are. I still want to build up my values really lightly though. I don't want to press too hard. So I still want to work on my smooth transition of values where if I was starting to press a little too hard in that section, I'm pressing lighter. I'm putting less pressure on the pencil as I pull down, and I want to continue that on this side where I'm pressing a little bit harder and lifting up the pressure as I move down. And look at that harsh transition of values. I need to get that smooth transition back in, so I'm going to press hard in my core shadow again and lift up the pressure of my pencil as I reach and become closer towards my highlight. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, pressing harder, and I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I come closer to that highlight. Now the problem with my sphere right now is that you can see the direction of my mark. So this means I have to cross hatch in a different direction. So I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to go straight because I'm in the middle of my sphere. And I'm trying to build up all of these darker values in the bottom 3/4 of this sphere. So I'm pressing harder near this edge, and I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I go towards that highlighted section. And once again, I'm making sure that all of my marks start on the outside edge of my form and reach towards the other end. I recommend cross-hatching in several different directions to hide the direction of your mark making. You want your sphere to look really nice and smooth at the very end of this. So by hiding the direction of your marks by cross-hatching in several different directions is going to ensure that your sphere does look solid and round and doesn't show too much line direction. This is my highlight, so I don't want to put too many marks there. I'm also going to cross-hatch from this side as well. In the middle, once again, my line is going to be straight, but as I come towards my edge, it's going to become more round. And I am lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I come closer to that highlighted area. Now I'm noticing that my core shadow is not that dark. I also need to make sure that I'm keeping my circular shape, so I'm going to modify that. So once again, I need to darken my core shadow. Notice how I'm gradually building up these values. So now I'm going to press even harder in that section and lift up my pressure as I go into my reflected light area, and also lift up my pressure of the pencil as I go into my highlighted section. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Press harder, lift up the pressure, press harder down here, and lift up the pressure of my pencil. I am just going to cross hatch one more time to hide the direction of those marks. And what I can do next is I can start cleaning up my edges. So once again, you can use your kneaded eraser as a drawing tool and go in there, and you might find that your sphere is going to look like a ball of yarn, and that's okay. Use your kneaded eraser, get a really nice soft edge. Just make sure you don't outline your sphere, because that will flatten it and not make it look three-dimensional. I also want to lighten up my highlight a little bit. So anytime that I'm going to lighten up the inside of my sphere, I want to make the kneaded eraser to a point, and I'm going to shade like I would with my pencil by using contour hatching marks, and that's going to lighten up that area as well. I did a little bit too much in this section, so because it's such a light value area, I don't want to use my HB. I want to use my 2H pencil just to build those values back in and to work on getting that nice smooth transition back into that section. And every time I modify my drawing, I want to make sure that all of my marks curve around the form and they start at one end of the sphere and end at the other. Also make sure you're trying to make your marks as close together as possible. You don't want large gaps. And this is perfectly okay to do, to skip back to your 2H pencil. This is going to make sure that you're creating that nice smooth transition of values again. So if you find that the HB you've gone in too hard and you are having a hard time getting those lighter values back in again, go in with your 2H again to help create that smooth transition. What you never want to do though is take your finger and smudge over the drawing. That is an unprofessional way to shade, so we want to avoid that at all costs. Now that I have a pretty good buildup of values, I can start my cast shadow. Try and match the shape of the cast shadow that you're seeing in the image above. And after you've drawn that, actually mine looks a little too big. After you've drawn that, go in and just lighten the edge of that cast shadow. Remember that I want to see a smooth transition of values from dark to light. So we're not fully copying this picture, but I want my cast shadow to be darkest near the object, and it should get lighter as it gets further away. So I'm going to do hatching marks here, and I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I'm drawing it further away, and I'm going to cross hatch because this is a cross hatched shading technique image. So I'm going to cross hatch over my marks, and I'm lifting up the pressure of my pencil as it gets further away from my object. And I'm going to cross hatch in another direction just to soften up the edges of my cast shadow a little bit more and to make that a little bit neater. You can see how this time I'm trying to be a little bit more specific about reaching the edge of my cast shadow. I'm lifting up my pencil after I make every stroke. And I am also lifting up the pressure of my pencil as I come further out to the edge. Now the only other thing that I'm missing in here is my reflected light. Remember that reflected light is a little bit of a light value right next to that cast shadow on the form. So I'm going to once again use my kneaded eraser and gently lighten up that reflected light. I might go back in here too and lighten up my highlight again, but that's what I should be seeing. I should be seeing a smooth transition of values. And actually, let's just do a quick review of things that you need to have on your sphere. 1, all marks should curve around the sphere. So only in the center of the sphere should they be straight, but as they come closer to the edge, they should be curving and trying to match the edge of that sphere. You want to shade with light values everywhere first with a 2H pencil. You want to gradually build up darker values with an HB pencil, and the drawing should include the following: a highlight, a core shadow, reflected light, a cast shadow, and then gradation, that smooth transition of values from dark to light that looks really nice and fluid.